I'm caught on your idea that you've been thinking about this, and I'm picturing in my head various situations where you'd be pausing, like disarming a bomb, and suddenly there's like a pause, and you end up thinking about Trial of the Time Lord. There's a damsel on the track, the train is coming, but you pause and step back for a moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kasterborous. My name's Christian Cawley. He's James McLean, and this week we're going to talk about the trial of a Time Lord, something that we've never done before on this show. Very briefly, it's been mentioned, with scant mentions, going back through our 500 episode history. I think there's been a tiny mention when Brian was around. We kind of don't really talk about it very much at all. In fact, maybe we've had it excised from our minds. Trial of a Time Lord was Doctor Who season 23. It was the entire season, and it's quite interesting that we're going to talk about this in this context now, because we just talked about the Daleks Master Plan. Trial of a Time Lord was 14 episodes long, and it was the longest Doctor Who serial since Daleks Master Plan when it went out. So there's about 20 years between the two things, 21 years between them. It went out 6th of September to the 6th of December 1986 and contained 4 adventures: Mysterious Planet, Mind Warp, Terror of the Vervoids, and The Ultimate Foe, and was Colin Baker's final season as the Doctor. The thing, James, about this, we've never talked about it before, and it is a collection of Doctor Who episodes that jump between being interrupted all the time, not working, but also having brilliant, very Doctor Who moments within them.
Yeah, I think one of the issues with it, I think, is maybe growing up with it, because it's one of those which we grew up with, unlike Dalek Master Plan, which was before we were born. I'm always caught by memories of disappointment at the structure. And it's such a weird one in that way. There's a tension, which maybe has shifted these days more because it's now a binge culture. But people don't like generally having to have that length of serialization.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it?
Popular mode, isn't it? So 14 episodes of a story, especially when they're like 20 minutes per week or so. And you already, as a child, I was not keen on Colin Baker's era because I found him, as we've said before, less so in this series, in this iteration, quite bullish and arrogant and shouty. And as a preteen, that was...
But he wasn't likeable.
He wasn't likeable, and that made me not really want to watch it. So I think there's always that stain of the memory of, like, not only do I not particularly like this Doctor, not only... I don't want to have a 14 episode thing. And I think the worst thing for me with the Trial of the Time Lord is all 3 of the main stories, and maybe even the backstory, the final epilogue story, would be so much better without, as you said, the interruptions, without the trial. The trial brings, for me, absolutely nothing. As you say, it's an interruption which just spoils, it keeps popping you out of the story.
Yeah.
And that is incredible. And it also, to some degree, weakens some of the story elements. For instance, Mind Warp.
Well, I want to So I want to, over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at it in more detail. I want to get into a couple of the things about it, which we're not going to see, I don't think, on the version that we watch.
Right.
This main thing is that each episode had a recap at the beginning when it went when it was broadcast, with those like BBC production stills, and then the BBC announcer giving you a recap of what happened in the previous episode, like you would have got with like a Sunday serial or whatever, which is incredible that they did that, that they felt that they had to do that. Kind of underpins the whole notion that maybe this long ongoing multi-story serial that's all one story in reality was a bad idea.
Especially for a show which was already internally political, but also not massively inappreciated space as it was. It
Yeah.
feels like you're adding a complexity to a problem that you don't need. You do not need to make this more complex. You just need to somehow win the audience. And I think as we'll see, to some degree, if they'd had a little more confidence in Colin, maybe if they'd actually changed his dress, because funny enough, I still think his outfit is one of his biggest hiccups.
Yeah.
Because I think we've said this again before in the podcast in the decade or so, but one of the points of a hero is that you want people, your audience wants to be like them, even if they're horror. You know, if you've got a hero like House MD, even though he's a terrible human being, there's bits of him that cathartically we enjoy, his ability to say what he likes. So we kind of want to be in that space. He's kind of cool in a weird way.
Yeah.
There's no way Colin's stuck at the outset of being cool when he's given this very clownish look, which just doesn't work for him. He's a young man as well, so it's not like he's like a William Hartnell, someone who you can go, oh well, he's a bit of a quirky, weird person. He's a young man who just doesn't look like someone you'd want to hang out with or even want to be. And so you've automatically got this. If you changed his outfit, changed his character as they do in this series and let those stories breathe, I think his legacy would have probably been stronger. But yeah, anyway.
He's so young, he's in his 40s, but yeah.
I think that, that is, given that Doctor Who was traditionally still thought of as being, even though Davison had bucked this, and Baker to a degree, Tom Baker. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, Tom Baker was 40, I think, but I think he was the youngest at that point. Yeah. And then,
I think the bottom line here is that I feel I could probably take a punch from Hartnell, but I couldn't take a punch from Colin Baker. He looked like a guy who, and to be fair, I mean, he'd played Gallifreyan Guards. He'd played Baben the Butcher, in Blake Seven. He played roughs.
Yes.
And here he was in this weird costume, and you wouldn't dare comment on his costume because you'd feel he'd take a good swing at you. Yeah. And obviously Colin wouldn't, but the character, as a child, I felt he was kind of imposing. He's a big guy.
So there's another thing I want to move on to before we start looking at the individual stories, and that is when I got the famous TARDIS tin VHS collection.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And they're all individual, and watched the Trial of the Time Lord on there. I remembered some parts and not others because I hadn't watched it all. I'm not sure if this is due to the A-Team or what was on opposite Doctor Who at that point.
Which again is interesting.
Yes, but the point I want to get to is watching the final. I watched the final episode when it went out. At no point was I aware until watching the VHS that the Valiard, spoiler time, was the Doctor. So that fact had, and I think that comes out in episode 13 when the Master appears. So that fact was not something that I was aware of. And this is another thing. I think this is a problem with making a big decisive kind of thing like that. It's nice as an idea, but then when you also throw the Master into the mix, it stops working as much because that's essentially what the Master is anyway. But the existence of the Valiard was something that I wasn't really aware of as being a thing until I got that box set. So I didn't get that moment. I didn't get to enjoy that moment with the Master's revelation until I got the box set because I'd missed episodes.
But as a kid, that revelation's not a pleasant revelation.
No,
and I don't dislike it. I never have disliked it, but it's not a clever revelation for a kid. It's kind of, for a character that you perhaps already don't feel particularly on board with, it's an added level of unreasonable and unexplained darkness with a vagueness which we would expect these days. It has almost like an adult vagueness to it. An iteration somewhere between two regenerations is kind of a nice vague sort of thing you'd imagine in a Russell T Davies or Moffat period.
Yeah.
But at the time it wasn't, and it reminds me, you sort of saying about that structure I always wondered, like, if it was done. I mean, it was obviously caught in an era where American courtroom dramas kind of had big appeal, and the runs in the UK with Perry Mason and the like. They clearly felt that this is something that Doctor Who could co-opt as a genre, as Doctor Who does, and work to success. But it's very hard to do that. And funnily enough, isn't it? When you think that what it was doing wasn't really done in an established way until the 90s with the TV series Murder One. Did you ever watch that?
I'm aware of it. I'm not sure if I ever watched it.
So it was pretty much one of the first big approaches to having a serialized story over a season.
Right.
You had to watch. And that really wasn't done before that. And that was in the 90s. But to be fair, Doctor Who was doing and that was again about an investigation of a murder. Doctor Who was doing that a good, 10 years beforehand. But I think if they'd done it where they'd done an episode at the front where he is brought to the courtroom to the charges, he escapes, and we have the adventures without that, and then we're brought back to the courtroom midway through, then another adventure, and then you pull out the end with the final revelation courtroom drama, 20 minutes. That would have worked far better, and probably more the sort of thing that if like Davis or Moffat or Chibnall or whoever did it now, that's how they would do it. They would try and self-contain those stories so they were watchable and in their essence, but connect them with an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. And this horrible mix of, as we will probably say, and I hope we don't end up just repeating ourselves, the horrible breakaway from the story to have these fairly muted bits of dialogue, which would basically be going, now look here's where the Doctor did this, what an idiot, and the Doctor going, well, I'm not the idiot, you're the idiot, and then Linda Bellingham going, actually you're both idiots, let's carry on watching it, and then we'll go back to the story. And that was kind of it. If it stopped and like there was some evidence brought in and then there was a thing that went on, maybe, but it's a weird format, but probably not weird in the time. Thinking about it.
Well, yeah, possibly. I just want to quickly summarise the story. So we've got The Mysterious Planet, which was by Robert Holmes, which is the first Robert Holmes Doctor Who in nearly 10 years at that point. You've got Philip Martin's Mind Warp. You've got Terror of the Vervoids by Pip and Jane.
My brain says, wasn't Robert Holmes two Doctors?
Yes, he was two Doctors. Sorry, two Doctors was the first thing that he'd done for a long time on Doctor Who, wasn't it? And then he came back and did Mysterious Planet. In fact, he was very instrumental in this serial because Terror of the Vervoids by Pip and Jane, and then the finale was supposed to be all Robert Holmes, but it ended up being Robert Holmes and Pip and Jane because it wasn't finished, and sadly Robert Holmes passed away. So, and this is one of the things that's quite fascinating to me about this, is that you've got Robert Holmes, who was absolutely pivotal in Doctor Who in the 1960s and the 70s, particularly in the 1970s, where he's script editor for a time during that big part of the Gothic period of Tom Baker, but also he sadly passes away during the production of this, and Eric Saward does one as well in this show. So so there's a lot going on with this, and then there's the whole, and this has been uttered many times, so I don't think there's anything we can really add to this, but there's this whole kind of mirror element of Doctor Who being on trial, which seems like, I mean, on one level it seems, that's clever, isn't it? But on the other hand, it feels very self-indulgent by the producer to take it along those lines. Well,
and also potentially very dangerous, because you're reminding everyone of the instability of the show, that it's not in a good space. Do you want to remind people of that?
Yeah. So, and but you mentioned Linda Bellingham. We haven't mentioned Michael Jaston by name, which I think we should, because Michael Jaston's one of these character actors. It's absolutely marvelous voice and presence on screen, and maybe there's like a parallel universe where he actually plays the Doctor. And I know there's the Valiard audios, isn't there, with Big Finish, where a certain line is taken with that. And I do feel maybe he's one of those actors that I always think should have been in more things than he was. But as I understand, I think he was quite keen on the stage, so that's probably why he wasn't. Because he was in a massive movie, so like 16 years before this, and then did very little on screen, apart from odd appearances and a couple of TV shows.
I mean, again, if Doctor Who, and it goes back to our conversation on the previous week with Master Plan, if Doctor Who had continued past its 26, and we've got a 27, and I almost feel like this should have been a good place where you got rid of the Master and moved on to the Valiard and had the Valiard because by this point, Ainley is struggling with the way they're portraying him to carry that same power and malevolence he has in Logopolis and Castrovalva. He's more of a very camp, ludicrous character to some degree. And you feel like the Valiard actually has a little more of perhaps what Ainley had in Logopolis. Yeah. So would this have been a move to have left the Master behind now, or killed the Master off and move forward with the Valiard? That said, I do enjoy him a lot in Survival, and he makes that story. So again, not against Ainley, and I do enjoy the Master.
And he's enjoying himself in Destiny of the Doctors as well.
He's very much enjoying himself in his booth in Destiny of the Doctors. Yes, he is giving a lifetime performance. But all that camp energy, which he'd been denied for years with no returns to Doctor Who, had just built up and festered, and he just lets go. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the 11th Doctor's regeneration. He just holds it all in, and then it all comes out at once.
Yes. It's I mean, I know we've said this again before, and I know I keep caveating that, but if a listener has not watched any of his performances for Destiny of the Doctors, I mean, his evil chortle laugh at his own plan, the length he holds that for, and they let him go.
Yes.
It's not just a ho ho ho, it's a ha 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 ho. It's almost preempting the whole Mike Myers Austin Powers.
Yes,
how long
Dr.
can you
Evil.
keep a evil laugh? And it's like, well, look at Anthony Ainley. Master can go for a long time.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Check it out. Doctor Who ends with the trial of a Time Lord in some ways. Some people, in fact, in some people's eyes, Doctor Who did end with the trial of a Time Lord. You know, people were saying, through the night, we don't like the Sylvester McCoy era. Let's reset it back to the end of the trial of a Time Lord, of all things. Sorry for the volume there, but come on. But, there is... I mean, obviously, we got Sylvester McCoy on the floor of the TARDIS in Colin Baker's wig the following year. But there is a thing here where... a missed opportunity here, which, Doctor Who in the 1980s wasn't going to take, BBC in the 1980s wasn't going to take, where you cast Michael Jaston as the Doctor, a dark Doctor who has like a completely different trajectory into becoming the Doctor, essentially. Meeting people, along some of the lines of what the Big Finish thing did, finding humanity within himself and becoming the Doctor. They could have done that. They weren't going to do that. I know we've got this massive 40-year hindsight advantage here, but it seems like a huge missed opportunity.
But isn't that the same missed opportunity they should have done with Capaldi? They obviously want it, and it's almost there, but I feel that's by accident.
Yeah,
and pressures of where Capaldi wants to go, rather than as we've said, I keep saying that at the moment, Malcolm Tucker moving to sort of more of a Capaldi personality by the last series. You could have had that as an actual story trajectory for the character. You could have done that Valiard thing and had Capaldi as almost a Valiard character who finds his humanity. I agree, absolutely. It's too dark. But then, I mean, I think, didn't Baker say that he kind of wanted like a leather jacket or something? I think he did say when people have interviewed him about Eccleston, he was like, I wanted to have that. I wanted to have the leather jacket and play a sort of probably more to his...
Yeah, he was in a show, he was in a crime show, wasn't he, called The Brothers, where he was kind of very stylishly attired.
Yeah, and that was kind of his IP to some degree. Yeah. And that would have been a really nice juxtaposition. Well, I'm just thinking like Baben also liked his leather as well, and the bulliness of Maxwell. He had a sort of sense of, playing sort of quite harder roles. And I think that would have been a better bounce off Davison than where they took it. And that I think was again, we're going larger here with the mistake of the Baker era, is that perhaps they took the wrong sort of gamble, and they should have made him a little more of a harder character from the start. As you said, warmed him up, but giving him a look that made people feel like, hey, this guy's kind of cool. He's not a silly parody where he thinks he's cool and everyone else realizes he's kind of embarrassing, which is where they took the character, which is funny for an episode, but then after that,
not so much.
But yeah, in fairness, we're talking about an overview of the Trial of the Time Lord. I think it is some of Colin's best stuff, because they've tempered the character, and he's far more enjoyable to watch. I still have issues with Mel, unfortunately. Again, not against Bonnie Langford.
Yeah.
Just, again, how they wrote the character. It's a Stephen issue. Again, going back to Dalek's master plan, Mel has the Stephen issue. Is that she's a character with no proper origin and no proper foundation. So she just sort of floats on her own characterisms and nothing else.
Yeah, because there's nothing else there to work with. You know, she's a computer expert from Pease Pottage, and that's it.
And what's Pease Pottage, and what is a computer expert?
Isn't it something you have with Pi? I don't know.
Exactly. It's just so vague. There's nothing the actresses, the Langford's got to pull on there.
No, yeah.
There's nothing they've got to give. And it's the same with Stephen. It's funny, we were saying the other week with Stephen and Katerina, that Katerina, she has the key and she doesn't know what it is. It's like, well, quite likely a futuristic spaceman wouldn't know what a key is either, but we don't worry about that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But they have an issue with that, but we don't have an issue as an audience, to be fair, with the idea that future people would be so out of touch with some of the sort of basic. But that's the other problem with Trial of the Time Lord, unfortunately, is that I don't think they have Mel provides a strong support for the show when it needs something really to help Colin through.
So we've already mentioned Anthony Ainley, we've mentioned Michael Jason, we've mentioned Linda Bellingham. There's Tony Selby as well as Sablon Blitz, who pops up throughout with his mate Dibber for the first serial, and then he pops up without Dibber later on, I think. And the season 23, which we're probably not going to mention anything about this when we're going to be watching Trial of a Time Lord, so it's worth remembering that there was a different season 23 planned, which was the one that consisted of The Nightmare Fair by Graham Williams.
Oh, yes, of course.
Which had the return of the Toymaker. Yeah. There's a story called The Ultimate Evil, which was by Wally K. Daly, which was later... those have both been novelised. Mission to Magnus, I think, has been adapted for Big Finish by Philip Martin. And there was Robert Holmes' serial Yellow Fever and How to Cure It as well, which was commissioned, and Nathan Turner hoped to have Graham Harper direct it, but that was and that had the Master in it and the Autons, and it was set in Singapore, but that obviously got shelved. There's The Hollows of Time by Christopher Bidmead, who sadly passed away a few months ago. That was later adapted as The Hollows of Time for Big Finish by Bidmead. And The Children of January by Michael Feeney Callan, which was planned as a Big Finish Lost Stories range release, but has been shelved and has not been revived at any point. So it's quite interesting that there's an entire season that was actually planned and partially commissioned, and then that all got shelved, partially because of Doctor Who being put back 18 months, and partially because someone thought having the show on trial in the real world was a nice piece of meta commentary to take into the TV sets.
It still blows me away, when you're trying to find things to save the show. And Trial of the Time Lord is interesting in the fact, as you just kind of noted, that there's not really any of Nathan's returns apart from the Master, and I suppose Gallifrey.
Well, it's not Gallifrey though, is it? It's a space station.
Okay, it's a space station.
Yeah. manned by Time
run by
Lords.
Gallifreyans, by Time Lords. But you'd think this would be a point where the show is in rocky grounds, where you would dip into your and pull out your sort of your jokers and sort of put them on the table. So, like K9, to me, K9, I know they hated it. I know they had problems with it. I know it had a failed pilot, but ultimately the fact it had a pilot suggests that there is actually some currency left in this thing. That, you know, would that bring the kids back? If the kids are not watching, why not bring, even if it's just standing around, why are we not, this is just so weird in an odd way. And maybe a funny thing that Turner had so overused past stuff that to reuse it again now just would not have had any weight. But then what he was always reusing most of the time was the villains. But you know, audiences, if in Trial of the Time Lord, rather than getting Mel, and they'd used it as a celebration and brought back past companions, which you could do in that format quite easily.
Yeah.
And you could have brought Ian Cheston back, or if he's too far behind, Sarah Jane Smith or Romana, or, you know, God, you know, if
Jamie.
the audience is Adric. Oh, yes. So sorry, I meant Jamie. Sorry.
Well,
Adric,
no, well, you know, because Fraser Hines had only been there a couple of years before, so people will know him as a former character, and
he's still an ongoing face on television at the time with Emmerdale. So Emmerdale Farm. So yeah, I just feel it's a weird space that when you're in a real, you've had an 18 months pause. Clearly, everyone is looking at you for success. You've got to now revitalize yourself after a long gap to make yourself relevant again.
Yeah.
And yet suddenly, in a weird way, all Turner's usual tactics just go out the window. And he decides on doing stuff with brand new characters, which is, you know, conceivably it's cool, a courtroom drama. And the only thing that comes back at the end is the Master, which I don't think is, you know, that's not what you're after. You're really trying to get bums on seats at the beginning. That's the problem. And I think that's, as we were watching Mysterious Planet's problem, is that if that's the point where you're trying to get people into the series, because you need them at the beginning, because it's a bloody courtroom drama that's going to go for 14 episodes, why is there no pizzazz in those first, you know, why is there no K9? Why is there no, you know, Jamie? Why is there no, you know, big name faces to sort of pull you in, apart from Linda Bellingham and Jason? Their roles are kind of on the sidelines.
Yeah.
It's just such a weird misstep for a show and a producer who is usually, I know people knock him for it, but always thinking about the manipulation of the media and the public, and the choices he make are just not the right ones at this time, which it's easy for us to say in hindsight, I know. But
well, there's various things about this that we're going to get into in more depth. So it's good that we're having this kind of like a more holistic take on this sort of overview. I've spent a bit of time thinking about this since the idea was first mooted in my head following the conversation that the two of us had. And I find it quite amazing. I mean, that this show actually went out in the way that it did. I'm amazed there was no intervention, given how much intervention there had already been with Doctor Who in the prior sort of 2 years, that there was no intervention in this from the BBC high ups.
I'm caught on your idea that you've been thinking about this, and I'm picturing in my head various situations where you'd be pausing, like disarming a bomb, and suddenly there's like a pause, and you end up thinking about Trial of the Time Lord. There's a damsel on the track, the train is coming, but you pause and step back for a moment, because this whole thing is really... Where do you start? Do you have a thinking corner?
I'm amazed that you think I work for CI5, frankly, but...
Or is it like the end of the Blair Witch Project, where we just come into a room and find you facing the wall in the back of an empty, cold room, thinking about it? How weird does it go? Sorry,
So,
but no, I agree with you absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to Mr. Cowley the other day, and no, but seriously, it's how did this happen? Given
this would be the point where you would demand, as the BBC, to lose. And I don't mean to hard way for Baker. You get rid of Baker, you start again after 18 months with a brand new person.
Yeah.
That might actually work for this format.
Well,
you put
there
it
is
on trial, someone.
But also, is there not an argument for getting rid of the producer?
Well, I think this is the key thing, isn't it? Politically, it feels like, one, as Nathan Turner and Cartman have sort of said as well, no one wanted the job, I don't think, and he didn't want to leave it either. So you'd need to actually, and as we've seen with more recent producers, getting rid of producers can be quite hard if they don't want to go. A bit like politicians. But I think also, I wonder whether this was a bit of a sink or swim moment, where it was almost like a justification to box it and put it away if it doesn't succeed. So maybe that's the reason there was no intervention. It was like a step back. You either sink or swim here, and we're very happy to let you sink.
Yeah.
And so they weren't, as you said, that you're right. It feels like there needed to be some sort of oversight over what was going on here. Someone should be able to turn around and go, this is not how television's really working at the moment, or where it is working like this, Doctor Who's not going to be able to do it because its rhythm doesn't allow this. It's not a soap, and we know soaps are big at this time. So serialization in soaps works really well, but you cannot play that melodrama in this sort of format. So it's just not going to work. So you're going to have to do something different. You're going to have to do something about Colin, which is different, probably more than just toning him down. We've got to revitalize him. And
yeah. I'm just looking at Jonathan Powell, who was the head of serials at the time. I'm reading this from Wikipedia, and there's a quote from the Matthew Sweet's review in The Guardian of J&T, The Life and Scandalous Times of John Nathan Turner, which was by Richard Marson. Powell, it says in Wikipedia, had a low opinion of the series, meaning Doctor Who, and especially despised its producer, John Nathan Turner, whom he later said he wanted to, this is the quote from the book, fuck off or die, really. After an outcry from the series fans and tabloid campaign, back to Wikipedia now, this decision became an 18-month hiatus instead. Doctor Who was cancelled in 1989. At this point, Powell's already moved on to become controller of BBC One, replacing Michael Grade. And it was head of series Peter Cregeen who cancelled Doctor Who based on its... well, I mean, we know that the Doctor Who was becoming a more entertaining proposition by 1989, but it would seem that maybe the decision had already been made for it to
But again,
end.
it's cultural taste. Science fiction's not in the vogue.
Exactly.
It is now a show which the BBC don't understand, and the show itself probably doesn't quite understand where it is.
Yep.
It's being hit by Coronation Street, which is still the craziest thing to me.
And the El Dorado budget as well. They wanted that.
There's so many things there which is going against it. So yeah, this decision is a culturally political decision rather than, I think, a quality of what McCoy was doing.
Yeah. So it's all strange that it kind of centres around Trial of a Time Lord in many ways. But again, like just going back to what I said, I do still find it amazing that they just didn't replace John Nathan Turner. And I've never really bought the idea that no one wanted to be in charge of Doctor Who. No, at the same time, people were trying to make a movie of Doctor Who. There was plenty of interest of people wanting to run Doctor Who. I agree with you. I think there is this myth that, and I think it's a myth probably perpetuated more from Nathan Turner. Yes.
That it was a job that he didn't feel anyone else could do probably as well as him, and he was going to be the protector, custodian of it. No. Yeah. But you're right. It seems a very weird thing that would be the thing to do. If the show's failing, change producer, see if that ignites it. There'd have been a good strong argument to have, as I say, shifted Colin as well, because I don't think Colin was doing, unfortunately, what was needed. He was the wrong person, wrong person at the wrong time, really.
Yeah.
And see where that taken it. But this is the beautiful thing, isn't it? Is that we can watch Trial of the Time Lord now, knowing where it goes, and where it goes allows the show to move on. It goes, unfortunately for Colin, but it goes to Sylvester, who, while not appreciated at his time, the style of the show with Cartmel involved there massively invigorated creative thinkings around the show in the 90s into the sort of into the machine that it became in 2005. So yeah, we can watch it and go, okay, in its time, what is here, what's going on here? And I'm kind of excited about that, to be honest.
So over the next few weeks, we're going to be kicking this off with Mysterious Planet. And if you're on Patreon, you're going to get all of these episodes in kind of one go. So we're going to do Mysterious Planet as one podcast, and Mind Warp as one podcast, Terror of Vervoid as one podcast, etc. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., you'll get those in a more serialized format over several weeks, and probably with interrupting episodes as well, while we discuss other things that have happened in the world of Doctor Who. So if you want those all in one go, come and join us on the Patreon. That's at patreon.com/Kasterborous. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe. 5-star reviews get read out on the show. We'll be back soon with The Trial of a Time Lord. Until then, it's goodbye from us.